Representative Alaman.
Excused.
Representative Angelos. Here. Representative Haroldson.
Here.
Representative Pendergraft.
Here.
Representative Sherwood. Here. Representative Smith.
Here.
Chairman Bear.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Representative Smith, would you please lead us in a word of prayer?
Lord, we just come before you and thank you that you're doing a good job trying to keep us healthy and energized at this midway point. Just give us wisdom that comes from you, strength and endurance that comes from you, and our words that glorify and edify you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance. Thank you all very much. And let's see, Representative Larson, would you please, and Senator Steinmetz, please come forward. And I believe Director Mead, you'd like to join them for this presentation. And we'll get right into the Omnibus water bill. If you could give us just a brief description of the highlights of it, and then we'd really like to focus on the financial side of transfers and ultimately those transfers that are coming from LISRA, and we'll get right to work on this. Thank you all for being here. Whoever would like to lead off.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. You look so bright-eyed and bushy-tailed after a long night last night. So as you know, I'm just going to give you kind of an overview over the program. I know that most of you have seen it before, but just a reminder that all of this money comes from severance tax distributions. It's that fund our water development accounts. It's around $29 million that we have every year to disperse to various projects across the state. The impetus behind that was when we started utilizing our minerals. We knew that that was a declining resource, and so we wanted to invest those into a renewable resource, which is our water, and arguably it is becoming more precious than gold in the state of Wyoming and across the country, as we see potable water is only about 3% of the world's water, and so it's very important. With that, I'll let Director Mead take you through the bill, but this is something that I do want to highlight for the Appropriations Committee. In the past, and we've had a refill here this last budget session, but the Board of Control budget, which is a function of the State Engineer's Office, which is contemplated in the Wyoming Constitution, has been funded through the Water One account. It's around $16 million per biennium. And even in this budget, there have been recommendations to add to the Board of Control, so to 3 positions, I believe, that were denied at this point. But every time we add more of an impact on that, it's less water projects we have out across the state. So I would encourage the committee as we go into the budget next session to look at putting the Board of Control back on the general fund through the state engineer's budget so that we have more funding for our communities and agricultural producers across the state in the water development program. With that, I would let Director Mead or Representative Larson add their comments and answer any questions you might have.
Very well. Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Larson, House District 17, and I'm just a member of the Select Water Committee, sat through the interim and listened to the projects. So if there's anything that pops out to you as concerning, I can try to help answer. I have a whole binder here of projects, so
Representative Larson, no such thing as just a member. You're,
right.
You're important to us all. All right. Director Mead.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Jason Mead, Director of the Water Development Office. You have a binder in front of you, and it could be a good resource when you're out on the floor, so I'll just mention what is in there. Inside the front cover, which we'll be working from this morning, is a blue sheet, and that's a summary of the entire bill. After that, in the front cover is the fiscal note and then the actual bill itself. Tab A, if you're interested, I know some of you folks joined us for the orientation we had the day before session started, is just a little 2-page summary of our program. Under tab B is the account balances in our account 1, new development, account 2, rehabilitation, and account 3, dams and reservoirs. And that's prior to the projects that you'll see in the construction bill and the planning bill. And then tab C and the rest of the notebook are actually the individual recommendations for each project that were considered by the Water Development Commission and the Select Water Committee in advance of putting all these things into this bill. So with that, I direct your attention again to the blue sheet. And I'll just run through this, trying to focus more on the funding. So the first section, well, real quick, how that's laid out. If you look in column 1, it shows a tab. So for instance, Bighorn Regional is under tab C. So if you wanted to learn more about that project and the details, you go to tab C. And then you see which page of the bill that project sits, the name of the bill, the location, which account the funding is coming from, and then some information on the terms, description, notes, things like that. Okay, so the first section would be our new development account 1 projects. We have 3 sponsored projects. We also have our 2 cloud seeding programs and funding for our small water project program. That amounts to $5,583,343 out of account 1. The other thing I would bring to your attention, when we met with House Ag on Tuesday, they amended into the bill an additional $20 million from LISRA, and that was to look at or investigate the feasibility and, if feasible, to design and construct 1 or more wells necessary to provide additional water to lands within the La Prairie Irrigation District. So that was an amendment on on Tuesday from House Agriculture. The second portion of the bill, as we work our way down, these would be out of our account 2 rehabilitation account. We have 12 sponsored projects and then funding for our small water program, but the rehabilitation portion of that equates to $17,094,331. And then as you get to the lower half of the blue sheet here, we get into the amendments to existing projects. So, and some other things. We're transferring several wells to sponsors. We're adding some additional funds to our account 2 sponsor contingency fund. Then we have 12 amendments to existing Title 99 projects. 4 of those add funds in addition to time. 7 of them are just time extensions only. And then we have the Alkali Creek Reservoir reversion, which relates to the La Prairie Dam, if you recall. At our December meeting, when the Select Water Committee reviewed the draft Omnibus water bill construction, they amended in $60 million from LISRA to help with the La Prairie Irrigation District project. At the same time, they suggested reverting $50 million from the Alkali Creek Reservoir project. So that $50 million would revert to account 3, our dam and reservoir account. Then it's transferred to account 2, which is where we're funding La Prairie Dam out of. And then it's a dollar for dollar reduction in the LISRA fund. So what comes of that is the $50 million would revert or would reduce the LISRA money from $60 million to only $10 million. Okay. And then the other one that was added by the Select Water Committee in December was $20 million for the Goshen Irrigation District Tunnels project. And that would be also out of LISRA. So with that, I would ask if there are any questions.
Okay, any questions for Director or presenters of the bill? All right, you guys have studied up on this. Very good.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just one addition on the thinking with La Prairie. So I believe we get 1.2% interest in the account that's been held in for all of this time, the dams and reservoirs. And I think they've been working on that project since 2007 or 9, something like that. We just felt it was a more appropriate use to utilize that and leave the money in the LSRA where we get a higher interest rate, and then let them come on back after they've got their easements, because we left enough money in there. I think they have $5 million left. We had anticipated 9, but they've expended some of that. So we wanted to be prudent in that way, and that's the reason for that change. So if you get any questions on the floor about it, that's the idea behind that.
Senator Steinmetz, I really do appreciate that, that thoughtfulness in the way you funded this, so very well. Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I guess, so if you look on your blue page, you'll see at the bottom, there's a repeal of 99-3-2903 redundancy projects. And the office, as well as the commission, determined that they barely have enough to do the existing projects, just standard projects through the program. Redundancy projects generally aren't something that they do normally, and so they decided to not use those dollars for redundancy and asking to take that language out. And I'm fine with that. I've come to terms with that. But I think if we're gonna hold true to not funding redundancy projects, the amendment from the Standing Committee, Agriculture, 20 million from LSRA for technically a redundancy project is inappropriate, in my opinion. The 20 million to find backup water. While I know it's needed, other communities are forced to have to do redundancy projects on their own. And so I think that that's something that the community will have to step up and try to do on their own, in my opinion. So just wanted to add my 2 cents there.
Go ahead, Representative Harrelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so I'm going to just show a little bit of my ignorance on this. Can we talk a little bit about, obviously $34 million worth of projects we're talking here in this between Water 1, Water 2. What's the funding model for Water 1, Water 2? Is that through LISRA? Is that general fund dollars? Is there an automatic dump that we get? Could you just kind of explain how the funding goes biennium on biennium?
Senator Steinmetz.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you look in your book, let's see, what page is it? It's right in after the bill, isn't it, Director? Yeah, the accounts. Tab B are your accounts. This is funded through severance taxes. So it just, I don't know how it dumps in, if it's yearly, quarterly, when every year we get biennially, we get a severance tax distributed to these accounts. And then LaPrel and GID, those are additional. So for example, the dams and reservoirs, the money for Alkali Creek would be held in there until that project starts construction. So they don't have their easements yet. So they're not even quite ready for that step. Does that help? Or I would phone a friend to the director.
No, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. No, that does help. I didn't know, that answered severance taxes. Okay. So Water 3 is our dams and reservoir account, which obviously it's fresh on everyone's mind because of LaPrel. But is there a certain amount of auto reversion into that number 3 account as well? And I'm looking, and I apologize that I haven't done more research on it, I should have. But just kind of, if you could give us that, how much goes into Water 1, how much goes into Water 2, and how much goes into Water 3?
Director Mead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Harrelson. So there's a cap in the severance tax distribution account of 155 million that then gets distributed. Water account 1 gets roughly 12.5%, just under that. So it equates to about 19.3 million, and that would be an annual, if you looked at it annually, into account 1. Account 2 would get roughly 3.2 million, and account 3 is only 0.5% of that $155 million cap. So that equates to $775,000 per year. I'd also mentioned, and Senator Steinmetz mentioned this previously, our budget for our office comes out of account 1. Currently, the Board of Control, State Engineer's Office comes out of account 1 to the tune of almost $9 million a year. There's also interstate streams, some Department of Ag, and then also the match or portion of the match to the drinking water SRF that we get from the EPA. So you put all that together, and when I talk about account 1 and account 2 and minus those non-project administration type costs, we're looking at, and this is with reversions and interest on the account, On an annual basis, we're looking at about $13 to $14 million available to actually complete projects. The account 3, dams and reservoirs, over the years has received infusions of funds to originally get it started from account 1, and then some other funding here and there has been put into that, because obviously at $775,000, you're not going to do a lot of construction projects for dams.
Mr. Chairman, one more follow-up.
Follow-up, go ahead.
No one asked questions, so I'll make up for it, so. Thank you. No, I appreciate it, because I think you had to have the history to know where we're rolling with it. And $750,000, I find that interesting, that we're looking at rebuilding dams at $750,000 a year. That seems problematic to me personally. Have we talked about, as we're talking about our waterways, we're talking about obviously the importance of water and all of that, putting more ice cube trays along the path obviously is always a conversation. Obviously, I understand there's a lot of permitting required. There's so much involved in doing that. But as we've talked about this, obviously, we're replacing a 100-plus-year-old dam right now. We're talking about that. But what else? Have we talked about increasing storage along our watersheds? And if we are talking about that, then our funding model needs to probably look at a shift to align with that ideology or with that push. Could you speak a little bit to that?
Before you answer, Director Mead, I'm just going to point out for the public, you can access a lot of these sources via our state finances tab on our website, and that is the wyoledge.gov. You go to state finances, you go down to data book, you choose general operations of government, and you choose revenue sources tab, and you can see where all the sources go into all the accounts. If you go down to water accounts, you can see severance tax and investment income are the two sources for those accounts, just to help the public out. Director Mead, please.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. So yes, we are looking at storage across the state of Wyoming. I think we have 10 to 15 different projects that we're currently looking at in different phases, all the way from, and Senator Simons mentioned Alkali Creek Reservoir started in 2007 or 8. That actually started with a watershed study, so it was more of a broad brush look, and then you kind of bear down, because you don't want to take one step forward, 2 steps back, and you got to be prepared for NEPA and answering questions and all that stuff from the federal government to get permits. But just looking at some of the reservoir sites that are looking more feasible, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars to get these built, and especially over the last 4 or 5 years, the costs have skyrocketed. So yes, at $775,000, it's not feasible, and that was originally, dams and reservoirs was originally under the kind of the same idea of used to be a 67% grant, 33% loan. With the amount of demand we've had on our program, we've had to drop that to 50% grants. And you're just not gonna, that's not gonna be affordable to water users from a reservoir at that. So we look at it on what's the public benefit of that reservoir, the indirect impacts to the local economy, and then that kind of steers us into what's gonna be the grant and the loan. We take that to the commission, the select water committee, eventually the body, the legislature. But we had heard some of the conversation at the last legislative session as similar. We know we need storage throughout the state. When we have that storage, bring it to us, and hopefully we're in a fiscal situation where the legislature can fund that. So again, I think it gets back to, yeah, we'd like to have a lot of funding go into account 3. It does take many years to get through and really get to the point of constructing a dam. So is it best to let it sit in account 3? That's what's happened in the past, and we've built that up with the interest on the account, which is great. But as soon as we've built, we restored Middle Piney Reservoir, enlarged Big Sandy Reservoir, in the process of building Levitt Reservoir, and at the tune of Levitt being around $80 million, that account quickly comes down. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Senator Steinmetz?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and just to pile on, as we look at the whole scope of what we have going on across the state, we have to take into consideration our aging irrigation infrastructure. Look at the cost of La Prelle Dam from just when we started looking at it in 2017 to now. And you recognize that we have an enormous liability in all of these structures that are aging out and reaching end of life. And so the other thing we talked about, because the rehabilitation comes out of account too, is looking at removing that cap. So just letting us take a severance tax on whatever the amount we receive that year is, instead of capping it at the 155 million. And then, deciding if we want to tweak how that funnels into these accounts. But I would also just say that rehabilitation is going to be, and I look at GID, the tunnel collapse, and that's looking now, they're getting numbers back at $130 million. And so we have, and producers can't afford to pay for that. If they increase the rates on the producers to try to come up with the money for this, you're looking at $58 an acre foot and more. That's not a feasible ag operation anymore at that point. And so there's all those considerations to be taken into account. And the office and the commissioners that work with the Water Development Office and the Select Water Committee are very cognizant of all of those issues, and we're open to looking at more funding if the Appropriations Committee is as well.
Okay. Any further questions for the bringers? All right, seeing none, thank you very much. Appreciate your presentation. Are there any other people in the room that would like to comment on this? Any electeds? Senator McEwen? No, okay. Anyone else? All right. Please come forward, ma'am. Please introduce yourself and who you represent, and tell us what your thoughts are on this bill.
Absolutely. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Holly Kennedy, and I'm here today representing the Wyoming Association of Conservation Districts. And I will keep my comments brief. One, because I know you've got a lot to get through today, and two, because the Wyoming Water Development Office and Senator Steinmetz, I think, did a really good job laying out some of the key elements of the bill. Of course, sitting in support of the bill here today, we just wanted to reiterate what a great bill it is, what a great set of projects that it supports, and also point out the amount of public good that is done through these projects. So, while these projects directly benefit the downstream users, those irrigation right holders, or I should say the bigger projects that we talked about today, right? There's also money in here for municipal water supplies. There's a broad breadth of projects, of course, within the bill. But speaking specifically to those reservoir type projects, which of course are very concerning to my members, they provide flood controls, which help protect infrastructure, and in particular, the Wyoming State Fairgrounds, which of course is state. And then they also provide, of course, recreation opportunities. They make sure that those streams maintain fisheries and things like that. And then we'd also point out how much supporting those small rural family businesses, those farms and ranches, also helps support those small rural communities. And so just thought I would highlight some of that for all of your consideration when looking at the funding in this bill.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Questions from Ms. Kennedy? All right. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much.
All right. And Ms. Childress, do we have anyone online for this particular?
No, Mr.
All
Chairman.
right. Any other people that would like to comment on this bill? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure?
Move the bill do pass.
Moved by Smith, seconded by Sherwood. Let's quickly go through this. I'm going to go this by section. So if you look at page 2, we have section 1. And if there's any motions through section 1, which has all the projects in it, please sound off now. Section 2 begins on page 40. So we've just gone through all of the projects which are on your blue sheet. And now we're getting to level 3 construction projects as we go into section 2. That takes us through to page 59, where we begin section 3. Page 60 is section 4. 61 is section 5. Any discussion on the bill? Okay, you've heard the motion. Ms. Childress, please take the roll call.
Roll call vote on House Bill 117. Representative Alaman? Aye. Representative Angelos? Aye. Representative Haroldson?
Aye.
Representative Pendergraft?
Aye.
Representative Sherwood?
Aye.
Representative Smith?
Aye.
Chairman Bear?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, 7 aye.
All right, omnibus water bill does pass. Representative Larson, would you care to be the lead on this presentation? And we will get in behind you and help you out with this one. All right, thank you for your help. All right. Now we're moving on to Senate File 69. Senator McEwen, if you wouldn't mind come forward and present the bill to us. Welcome to House Appropriations. Please proceed.
Senator Troy McEwen, Senate District 24. I'm here to talk to you about Senate File 69 engrossed. It's basically a property tax relief bill. I've given you a handout. And I'll give you just a little bit of background of where I'm coming with this. It's a good bill, and I wanted to emphasize the sky is not falling. We're not going to shut down police departments or fire departments with this. And if you look at the handout I gave you, the percentage on the far right column, that's the actual effect on each county. While it does have a little bit of effect on some, others it's minor, but it's all pretty small. The biggest county it affects the most is Teton, which oddly they're in the largest support of this bill. So we'll get into the bill. Basically what it does is it gives everybody an exemption for 50% of their fair market value. So basically just cuts the property tax in half. And it is for owner-occupied homes, or does not take into account renters or anything like that. There is no backfill to it. The cost on it is about $225 million. And it sunsets in 2 years, in 27. You're probably wondering why the sunset's there. 26, there'll be a ballot initiative, the People's Initiative. We'll see how that pans out, but I think we got to be ready to put this away if that passes, unless we want to cut everybody's property tax down at 25%. Not necessarily opposed to that, but might be kind of a heavy lift. Okay. It also spells out that if you take the long-term homeowner's exemption, you cannot take this exemption, or if you take this exemption, you can't take the other. It's really kind of a simple bill, straightforward. So I'll stand for questions.
Any questions for the bringer? Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to Appropriations. You mentioned the long-term homeowners exemption. In the testimony, were there any guesstimations about how many might cling to which side?
Senator McEwen.
Mr. Chairman, my guesstimation is a lion's share will go with 69 because it includes the land, where the long-term homeowners exemption doesn't.
Follow up. Representative Haroldson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Senator McEwen, thanks for coming. So as I looked at it, 2 years, correct?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct.
Okay, and a follow-up. And then, so as the handout you gave us, these percentages are taking into or weighing into consideration commercial property tax. And so it's not a 50% drop across an entire county. It's just we'll use my county Platte, we're looking at a 11.5% because of how it weighs out with being residential and what's covered under it compared to commercial and the rest of the property tax structure. Am I reading that right?
Mr. Chairman, that's exactly right. I would point out that number, like for Platte County, 11.5, it would be 5.55% on the cut because it's 50%. It's not the whole 11.5.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, the other thing to keep in mind as we talk about this and some of the impetus behind the bill, assessments have gone up 74 to 75% across the state. 74 to 75% since 2019. Inflation's gone up between 18.5% and 19%. So I would caution you, don't fall into the trap of it just kept up with inflation, because it didn't. There's a good 40, almost 50% increase in revenues, and only part of that was eaten away by inflation.
Further questions? Representative Sherwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator, for being with us this morning. I understand that there was an amendment in the Senate to give some flexibility in regards to a taxpayer who may not want to take advantage of this, for whatever personal reason. So we see that on page 3, lines 2 through 5. Could you please opine to the committee on how that might work? Thank you.
Senator McEwen.
Mr. Chairman, yes, ma'am. You will get your property tax bill. It will state your overall property tax, and then it will show the 50% deduction. And if you choose to pay the whole amount, you can. So there's not much overhead with it, and it does allow people who want to pay 100% to pay it. Please don't ask me how that's going to affect the cost.
Further questions? Yes, follow-up. Go ahead, Representative Sherwood.
Thank you so much. So can you, in your own opinion, talk about why a taxpayer may choose to pay the full amount? Thank you.
Senator McEwen.
Mr. Chairman, I guess an overall concern and love for state government and county governments. They just want to help out. Other than that, I, for the life of me, can't see why anybody would pay 100%. But I think some of the ranchers will because of their tax class, and they feel like, well, I'm speculating now.
Go ahead, Representative Sherwood.
Mr. Chairman, in visiting with my community over the summer, I did learn that there were taxpayers who wanted to pay above the 4% cap. And what they realized in doing that, so they're like, another $75, for example, on their bill. The clerks had to return that because there was no mechanism to accept that payment over that 4% cap. So I just want to make sure that with this amendment and what we're doing here, the clerks won't have to return those funds. They'll actually be able to accept that 100%.
It's probably going to be a question for the director. We'll get her up here in a moment, but go ahead, Senator McEwen.
Yes, since we're putting in statute, and that's how they're going to set the CAMA system up, it'll just be an automatic thing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Further questions for the bringer? I have a couple, Senator. You said you felt like the cost was, and I wouldn't use the word cost, it's just the reduction in revenue to the state would be, and this is the state money that is then sent to the counties and school districts. You said 225 million. I assume that's per year. Is that an accurate? You said 225 million.
No, I think that's the biennium.
You think it's 225 per biennium?
I'd have to look at the fiscal note. Actually, no, it's per year.
I know that when I was with you in revenue, we had we had, without the land, it was right around 400 million for the biennium.
Correct.
And then we added land to this bill, and I believe that would have increased it considerably, probably,
About 450.
yeah. Because I think land, from the landowners or the taxpayers' perspective, that's about 30% of their property tax bill. So it would be a significant amount. So you're estimating 450 then per biennium.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. And I see that Sheridan County is at a 30%, which you're saying that this would be cut in half. So it would be 15% would be their loss as far as their revenue. And what have their property tax assessment increases been? Are you familiar with that county at all?
I am. They were on the upper scale.
Okay.
In fact, here we go. About 72%.
They had about 72%. Okay. All right. Any further questions for the bringer? Senator McEwen, we appreciate you bringing this and presenting it, and if you could just stick by, we may have further questions. And Director, if you wouldn't mind coming up, and we're going to be limited on how much time we have, Director, and I know you're extremely knowledgeable about this, so if you could just give us some highlights in the next couple of minutes, just to give us an idea of your perspective on this particular bill and its impact on revenues.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brenda Henson, Director of the Department of Revenue. Good morning. Just appreciate the opportunity to comment related to the administration of Senate File 69 engrossed. One thing that I did want to clarify is that this bill is applicable to 50% of the single-family residential structure as well as the associated residential land. As stated by the Chairman of House Revenue, there is language on page 2, starting on line 10, that speaks to the exemption provided by this paragraph shall not be available to any person who has applied and received, and the statutory reference would be the long-term homeowners. Now, keeping in mind the long-term homeowners also is applicable to the residential structure and the associated land. And so as we look at what is the difference between the long-term homeowners and this bill is limited to $1 million fair market value. The long-term homeowners exemption is not limited. So we anticipate that property owners will apply for, keeping in mind when they apply for that, it has to be applied no later than the fourth Monday in May. Assessment schedules go out no later than the fourth Monday in April. And so we anticipate many people will be applying for this long-term homeowners. It's already on the books for 2025. They'll continue. Now, we already have assessors that are taking those applications currently. Estimated about 18,000 property owners have applied already for 2025, that long-term homeowners exemption. We anticipate about 25,000 statewide at the end. And it's important to note there is no backfill on the long-term homeowners exemption as well. You're also going to see a bill coming through that talks about the calculations. This is the first time ever that we've had multiple exemptions that are applicable to the exact same property. So we've got this residential structure that in 2024, we implemented that 4% cap that we have heard about this morning. In 2025, we continue to have that 4% cap on single-family residential structures, but in 25, we're adding the single-family residential associated land to that structure. That's already in statute. Plus, we've added this long-term homeowner exemption. What this bill does is implement another exemption. Now, if this were standalone, the CAMA system would not have the functionality to implement it, but due to the amendment that says if you receive the long-term homeowners, you are not eligible for this exemption, we can implement for 2025. This program, the language in Senate File 69 is not limited to homeowner occupied. This is across the board, and that is the only way it can be implemented for 2025. Think about that, where if we had to determine which homes were owner occupied, we've got about 230,000 single-family residential homes in Wyoming. The Census Bureau tells us approximately 72% of those are owner occupied, but we don't know which ones. It will take communication between the property owner and the county assessor to identify which homes are owner occupied. This bill does not require that. It is across the board. So as long as you are a property owner and you own a single-family residential structure as defined in this bill, you will receive 50% up to the $1 million of fair market value. Now, we have provided updated fiscal notes to LSO staff. The total cost using 2024, basically had this law been in place for the tax year 2024, the cost of this would be $254,737,792. That's broken up as such. Approximately $44.6 million, 12 mills to the school foundation. Local 25 mills for education and also the 6 mills for education, that would be $115,275,000. The county 12 mills, up to 12 mills, $44,600,000. And then about $10 million to municipalities, and then $40 million to special districts, and that includes your community colleges across the state. And that is the 50% single-family residential and the associated land up to $1 million in fair market value.
So, Director, then your calculation is that on a biennium, it's about $509 million per biennium.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, based on 2024 property taxes. Now, we do recognize that there will be some increases. If you have an opportunity, I gave an overview in November of 2024 to the Revenue Committee that talked about all the different property tax relief, and it also gave a history of the percentage of increase for residential value for each one of the counties. And you'll see that from 21 tax year to 22, we saw a significant increase. Another significant increase from 22 to 23. But when you look at 23 to 24, those increases flattened off. All counties but 2 are only single digit, and that's counting all assessed value, not just the increase, but saying, we've got new subdivisions, new construction. So I encourage you to look at that. So we aren't seeing the big increases. What I do anticipate is we'll still have some of that 4% cap. Because we're going to apply the 4% cap on the single family residence. In 24, that exempted $300 million of assessed value statewide. So we do that first. Then we've got a net value. Now we'll do it in 2025. We'll do that for the single family residential associated land. So we're going to have a cap value there. I think there'll be more people that'll benefit from that this year because we're talking lower numbers. So it's very easy to get a 4% cap on your residential land. And so we'll have that starting point. Then we'll apply this exemption of 50% on the net after the caps. And then if they've applied for the long-term homeowners exemption, the requirement will be assessors will need to apply that exemption and then go back and remove this exemption. But there's no application process related to this exemption.
Thank you, Director. I have one quick question, and then I'll open it up to my committee here. With this $1 million cap, and you said you anticipated 25,000 statewide applications for the, I think that was for the
That's the long-term homeowners, Mr. Chairman.
So how many of those can you estimate are above $1 million?
Mr. Chairman, we don't have that information. As I stated, county assessors are still accepting applications. And they have not even valued properties yet for 2025. We're right in the middle of their appraisal process, and they've got until the fourth Monday in April to get the $230,000 property, or 230,000 properties appraised. All of the exemptions that the legislature deems appropriate applied, and get those assessment schedules
My
out.
recollection is that from the debate on House Bill 203 last year, as well as similar bills to these, that with a $2 million cap, it would, everything under the cap was like 97% of the homes in the state. Does that sound fairly accurate to you?
Mr. Chairman, that does sound accurate. You definitely cover the majority of the homes in Wyoming, excluding some of our scenic areas with that $1 million cap.
That's the $1 million cap. Okay, so if you went to 2 million, it'd be much smaller than the 3%.
Correct, but there's just not an extensive number of properties above that 1 million.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the director? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Director. We appreciate your being here, and I think we're probably going to want to get a lot more data from you as time goes by, so we appreciate your being available. All right, do I have any electeds here that would like to opine on this particular bill? Representative Bratton? You're all good? Okay. All right, do I have any public commenters? All right, please come forward. And while they're coming forward, Ms. Childress, do we have anyone online for this?
No, not for this bill.
There's plenty of chairs up here, so if everybody would come forward that wishes to speak on this bill, and if chairs open up, you can come on up. And I'll start with you, Mr. Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Robert Short, Converse County Commissioner and Vice President of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. With me today is the Director of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association, Mr. Jeremiah Riemann. And with permission, Mr. Chair, I would like to acquiesce my time to Mr. Riemann.
That's fine. We appreciate your combining. Mr. Riemann, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Jeremiah Riemann here on behalf of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. I appreciate the time to address you. As I did with the House Committee on this subject, we understand the conversation that's happening in many homes about property taxes and that have happened over the course of the past few years. But I also would share and suggest to you that those residents aren't calling for a reduction in services, whether that be for their emergency services, their roads, and the other important things that I and my members provide, as well as the others that are here. I want to provide just a few data points, and I have shared some of this with you previously. I know you're getting lots of information, but I know that there was reference to the broader set of property tax classes and what those revenues look like in the context of residential property taxes. And I would just share with you that there are 8 counties that collect less in property tax across all classes today than they did in 2015. Those 8 counties are Bighorn, Campbell, Carbon, Fremont, Hot Springs, Johnson, Sweetwater, and Uinta. One of those is 50% reduction over that time, and that would be Johnson County. So the notion that the other revenue sources, the other property taxes are going to cover this sort of a reduction, it just doesn't hold a whole lot of water in some communities. Mr. Chairman, I have numbers both for all of the taxing entities as well as the counties, but I'll just mention the counties. If you looked at, and I'll try and just point to each one of your counties, Albany County, and I'm just talking the county as the entity, not all of the other taxing entities, will see a reduction of $2.5 million in their budget per year. Let's see, Campbell County, $2.1 million. Goshen, $650,000. Make sure I get all of you. In Natrona County, $4.7 million. Sheridan County, roughly $3.4 million. Those are things that are going to result in reduction in services unless there's some sort of mechanism that helps to offset those. And I know that this bill doesn't. Hopefully you're considering other options to do that. But these are serious reductions.
Could you tell me, do you know off the top of your head what the reserves are for these particular counties you just shared with us?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have those specifically in front of me. Mr. Chairman, it is true, some counties have reserves, but the notion that we can just dip into our reserves is no different than you dipping into your reserves to help cover us or to cover up the other things that you have to do. It doesn't last a whole long time for some of these communities to do that when those reserves are largely there for other purposes, debt service, et cetera.
Yeah, Mr. Reman, I understand that. I mean, right now, we're at a point where we're dipping into the LISRA to fund things that are on the budget, emergency fire mitigation, that type of thing. And so I am bringing an amendment, several different options for the body for backfill for those 8 most hardship counties and some of the special districts. But, if we're dipping into our reserves, I think it'd be great to have that information as to, what counties have reserves, which ones don't, and which ones are doing the max mill, which ones are not. So that type of information would be helpful as well.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I can tell you that there are 21 of 23 counties have maxed their mill levy. The 2 that have not are Campbell County is just under 11 mills of its 12. And Teton County is at 6.879 off the top of my head. So Teton County really is probably the only county entity that has the ability to cover up any of the losses that you're going to create with this legislation.
Okay. Go ahead, Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. I heard testimony from you, sir, in another committee, and you spoke about, these counties have reserves, but what do they have in mind for those reserves? What are their reasons for holding on to those funds? If you could kind of expound for just a minute on some of the things they're saving for, or what's at stake there? Thanks.
Mr. Reman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The good representative is referring to a committee meeting that happened at 11 o'clock last night. So it's certainly fresh on my mind. I'll just give one example that I have in front of me and that I referenced in that testimony last night. The county that we're sitting in today, in their fiscal year 25 budget, has a $92 million reserve. I'll just list, and I'm happy to give any of you a copy of this document. They have reserves for emergency needs of just under $20 million, election reserve of just under $200,000. They have an interfund loan, and the commissioners can talk more about what that entails. They have infrastructure reserve. They have a reserve for their planning and development, for public works, and for health insurance. Those are all the categories of their reserves that make up that $92 million.
Thank you. Further questions? All right. Sir, if you could please share your name with us and who you represent and your thoughts on this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Matt Murdock. I'm the mayor of the town of Pinedale. Also, I am a member of the board of directors of Wyoming Association of Municipalities. We are currently monitoring this bill. As has been mentioned previously by multiple speakers, we recognize, and as a mayor of a small town, when people walk in with their property tax bill and they're like, wow, it's real for us. They are my neighbors. They're my friends. So we recognize that there is a high cost, and the number of citizens have spoken that they would like to see these costs reduced. That said, I think it's important to recognize that counties and towns in this particular case, do have critical infrastructure that we have to maintain. So when there are reductions in this revenue, it does directly impact us. When I go to the SLIB board and we are looking for funding on some project, we must have matched funds. We currently, the town of Pinedale right now is looking at a nearly $20 million new wastewater treatment facility because our community is growing. These funds are extremely important for the matches. Obviously, we run some projects as enterprise funds. But I know in the town of Pinedale, for example, when I became mayor years ago, we actually had the plan to chip seal about 1/6 of our town, 1/5 of our town every year. Costs go up, and we are now down to 1/9. And as potholes build up and sidewalks break, citizens are expecting the same services, as Mr. Raymond mentioned, but at the same time, we have to make that match. So we're very concerned, from the perspective of that, make sure that there is a backfill of some way, because we do have critical infrastructure. We do have a large number of absentee owners. I think in Sublette County, we're about 30% of people who are not owning or they're not occupying the homes that they own. And we are also just looking at increased expenses. And in Sublette County, in some parts of areas, when we put projects out to bid, we're hitting 20% higher than what we actually budgeted on some of these projects. So these are things that are expensive across the route. I will mention, just to a question that was asked earlier, I know that reserves are often looked at as, hey, use your reserves as well. Our reserves are there for multiple reasons. I know for the town of Pinedale, our reserves are there to meet immediate needs when something comes in or funding. I was at the SLIB board not too long ago. We had hoped for a larger grant and loan. There are a lot of needs in this state, and so we all kind of sit at the table and we're like, okay, we'll share that. We'll take a little less, you can get a little more, but we have to dip into our general fund to make up that loss. Now, Pinedale has the advantage that we do have some of those reserves, so we can. I know in Sublette County, I can speak to that because we worked very hard. We are the only county that does not have a hospital. That hospital does come under some of the, if you will, partnership with the county. So we're looking at some major infrastructure projects that are going on, that those reserves are there to make sure that our citizens get the services that they need. So as I said, WAM is currently monitoring this bill. We would appreciate that any consideration to reduce the tax burden on the citizens is equally balanced and concern of the operation of the critical infrastructure that town and counties provide. And with that, sir, I stand for any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Mayor Murdock. Questions for the mayor? Okay. Ms. Taylor? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Dr. Ben Moritz. I'm the Executive Director of the Community College Commission. And I would like to afterwards turn it over to Ms. Taylor and to President Tyndall as well. They have a few other comments. But I would like to start, I would like to echo some of the comments that have been made before. We also recognize that increased property tax bills can be a challenge to many of our citizens, and addressing that is an important question that this body takes up. Having some sort of backfill to account for those lost revenues is something that would definitely help the colleges address a significant revenue drop that this presents. I supplied a handout that shows how this 50% cut on residential impacts the different colleges. The total cost on an annual basis to the colleges is almost $11 million. And some of you may be more familiar than others with how the funding model works for the colleges. Traditionally, it's been 60% state aid, 20% tuition, 20% local revenue. That has eroded over the last 10 years, and we're now down to approximately 53% on the state and about 23, 24 for tuition and local revenue. So that local revenue, which comes from the mill levies, the property tax exemption would impact, has a disproportionate effect on the colleges. And amongst the colleges, those that would be impacted the most typically are those that are smallest and are least able to bear such a large cut. So if you look across, Sheridan and Eastern are two of the smaller colleges, and they would have a higher proportion of cuts than some of the other ones due to the makeup of residential versus mineral and commercial in those areas. I also want to mention that the colleges operate very similar to small businesses. I know when you think of higher education, you might think of the University of Wyoming. They have a larger rainy day fund than the colleges. The colleges, in fact, have a statutory cap on how much they can retain from state funding from year to year, so they don't have large reserves. They have foundations, but those are for other purposes. Generally, a lot of that is used for scholarships to make sure that the neediest or most meritorious students can afford to attend. Another issue is that the colleges are the workforce training engine of the state. And many of those workforce training programs, the Career and Technical Ed, CTE, tend to be those that have the highest costs that go along with it. If you want to learn how to be industrial maintenance, if you want to learn how to do welding, if you want to learn, a lot of these programs, there's high capital costs that go along with it. And so when you have cuts that can be as high as $3 million a year, it makes the continued offering of these services difficult. And then the last point I would just make is that the colleges, because they are on such thin budgets, their largest cost center by far is salaries. And so when you see these cuts, it's without a backfill, it will most likely lead to an erosion of the ability to employ people in the communities that they serve. So there are significant impacts, and we just want to make sure that this body is aware of those. And with that, I would open up for any questions.
Any questions for the doctor? Ms. Taylor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Good morning. I'm Erin Taylor. I'm the Executive Director of the Community College Trustees Association. And so speaking on behalf of the 56 elected trustees across the state, I wanted to just give you a couple points. I appreciate those that have already been made today, and much of what I would say would echo that, but you heard from the commission, and then I do have Dr. Tyndall here, who is president of Central Wyoming College, for just a few remarks. But what I wanted to just mention quickly was, you heard Dr. Moritz talk about the impact on salaries, things like that. What I wanted to share with you today was the many years that I have spent at this dais right here talking about sustainable funding for the community colleges. And this has been for, like I said, years. A period where the colleges went through cuts like many other state agencies, assessed valuations maybe weren't where they were, inflationary impacts, employee compensation. The community colleges, unlike other entities that provide education services in the state, are not in the Constitution. And so when we talk about reduction of one of those levels of funding that Dr. Mitz talked about, it matters. And I heard, I'll just relay this. I heard this on the other side of the building on a different bill. Well, this isn't that much to the colleges. It's, the fiscal impact is small, but every single dollar matters. And that's what you heard from Dr. Moritz, particularly to the smaller colleges who may not have the ability to roll with it, to cut here and do something there to make up for it. They're already in that space. And so I also wanted to echo, Mr. Chairman, with the last thought and echoing what you heard from Director Henson. The dust hasn't settled yet on some of these other measures that are rolling. So the colleges are still trying to figure out what is the impact from the 4% cap, what is the impact from the long-term homeowners offering, and also without a backfill. So the dust hasn't settled, and so we're really watching this. And the trustees, of course, hear this in their communities, so they're empathetic. as elected officials, I wanted to make sure that you knew that as well. But as the stewards of these tax dollars that are locally imposed, this is something that's very concerning to them. Mr. Chairman, I'll end my comments there and turn it over to Dr. Tyndall, if that's okay with you.
Yes.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Tyndall, please, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am Brad Tyndall, president of Central Wyoming College, and also representing this week the other community college presidents. And so as you heard, these cuts would be substantial. And so let me just kind of give what's it really like on the ground. So the budgets are really, really tight, and we're down as a system and as a college from all the cuts we've had in the previous year, 2000, the Great Recession, 2006, and then 2016. And so we more than tightened the belt. So we have at our college what is called the monster spreadsheet. And so we check the rate of return on every single academic program, and they are now all in the black. So if you're running a business and you're making money on every item, and someone says, well, you have to cut an item. I say, you understand that when I cut that item, my revenue goes down because I've through federal grants and everything else and philanthropy has done everything we could. And so it's in a tight position where it's like the fluff is gone. And so you cut things that are making you money. And so the economics of this. And so the trustees have seen this coming. And so this last summer, the trustees got together and they charged all the presidents to do a return on investment study through Lightcast. And it was very, very interesting, the results that they came across. Not only is this really good for students, and let me talk about the results on that. For Central Wyoming College, and our results was very typical. It changed only a few percentage from college to college. The investment that a student does in their life has a 1 to 7 return. But this means if you convert their investment into education for the rest of their life and you compare it to like the stock market, there's about a 25% return. It's 24 point something percent, super impactful for these people. And for the state, you look at all the money, their tuition money, all state, local money that goes into our budget, which is $39.1 million, and you look at the impact, there's a 1 to 4.4, basically a 440% return on your money. We have good products, and if you want to cut it, it makes the state's and local economy worse off. You're cutting something that has a return on investment. It's not smart investment money. And why is there such a high return on investment? So just think about it of our sector. We have a sector that's not K-12. People choose to come, and at Central Wyoming College, 85% of our students are at risk, federally defined as they're poor, Pell eligible, or they didn't score well on their ACT test, they're not college prepared, or they're first generation of all their relatives to go to college. Them coming forward, eager to say, I want a hand up and propel forward from an at-risk population, the return on investment from this education is crazy good. And we're blessed to be in this sector. And then doing cuts to this sector just hurts your bottom line overall. It's just, speaking as an economist, that's my PhD. And so I would say that's going through our mind is this doesn't make sense. And our reserves aren't big, as you heard from Dr. Moritz, and they're designed for like one-time shocks that come along. If these taxes that we're hearing about are continual, you don't use reserves for continual disaster. They're used for one-time response to things. Otherwise, your reserves go to zero and then go negative, right? So it's not wise to touch your reserves for what looks like will be consistent tax cuts going forward. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I stand for questions.
Dr. Tyndall? I have one, and I do understand your point about return on investment, and if you cut a program that's already making money, then your chances of making more are definitely reduced. So great point there. But my question is, during the upswing, and I visualize what the taxpayers are suffering under is this large influx or increase, and it didn't happen in every community equally, but there was starting about 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, and then it's tapered off, as the Director of Revenue mentioned now. So did your college see an influx of revenues during that time based on I assume you had a flat mill during that time, no changes to your mill levy?
Yeah, yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll make a quick comment and then pass it over to the person who understands this much better than I do, Dr. Moritz. But in general, we do have seen some fluctuation. We heard that Fremont County in particular is down, one of the 8 counties that we're concerned about. But over time, it is true, there are times when you have a good year and a bad year. And typically what we do in a good year is you put that in reserves because you can't budget off that, right? So it's kind of like up and down, and that's why you have reserves. So pretty much that money went into reserves. And our total reserves amount is down because through time, we continue to be cut. Thank you.
Further questions? I think we're going to go ahead and move on, but I appreciate the community college testimony here. Much appreciated. Okay. Ma'am, would you please introduce yourself and go ahead and opine on this?
Good morning, committee. Good morning, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak this morning. My name is Micah Richardson, and I'm with the Wyoming Women's Foundation. And I am speaking on this issue. I've had a few people ask why would the Women's Foundation be interested in property tax. It doesn't quite necessarily seem like something that we would, is that running through your mind, maybe?
Everybody should be interested in property
I
tax.
agree, I agree.
Okay. Go ahead, Ms. Richards.
So when we're thinking about this and thinking about our elderly women in communities who might be on a fixed income, it's really important that we think about like that those women are well taken care of. And we feel like the property tax refund program that is already in place does that. That makes sure those lowest income folks are taken care of. But when we also think about this as the Women's Foundation, we're thinking about what are the other programs that are so essential to communities that benefit women and girls, and there are a number of them. Our senior centers, for one, obviously. Our community colleges, a majority women attend those as well. Those are really important, but I think one area that I don't think has been highlighted as much are our local BOCES. So those are out-of-school time programs that are so important to families who are working, to those children who are receiving those additional resources and educational stimulation that's so great. But on top of that, our BOCES in a number of our counties provide childcare. And that mill is really important. I think a lot of you know and have seen childcare centers closing across the state. That mill levy is really important to keep those centers afloat. It's very difficult to make a go of it as a child care center or home care, and we're working on other ways to support it, but that mill we have seen be sustainable and hugely important to our child care centers, to those, so I just want to highlight that. So we also would just really love to see some sort of backfill so that these really critical services in our communities that are important to women, girls, families, all of us are taken care of. So thank you.
Okay, Ms. Richard, any questions for Ms. Richardson? All right, thank you for being here. We appreciate your input. Chief, please.
Good morning, members, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Josh Van Black. I'm the Division Chief with Laramie County Fire Authority, and I'm here today before you representing the Wyoming Rural Firemen's Association and the County Fire Chiefs Association. Obviously, we're closely monitoring this and all the other tax reduction bills before the legislature this session, and we recognize that there's going to be a cumulative effect of these tax cuts on special districts in particular. Our special districts, our fire districts, EMS districts, et cetera, operate on a shoestring budget as it is. And any reduction to these funds to the counties, to the special districts, are going to directly result in a reduction in services. We have a little bit of reserves, but our reserves are earmarked for replacement of an apparatus. If we have an apparatus struck on the interstate, obviously our insurance will help cover some of that, but a new fire truck right now is running $1.2 million. And so that would wipe out our reserves if we had to buy a new apparatus using those funds. Likewise, the special districts have very little opportunity to generate any revenue outside of what they collect on taxes as part of their mill levies, and we're capped by statute at the 3 mills. So we're kind of shoehorned into a little bit of a corner, and every dollar does matter in our response and our ability to assist those within our jurisdictions. As we've heard throughout the session, there's an increased emphasis on wildland response. Currently, the counties, the special districts provide the vast majority of wildlands response on private and state lands throughout the state. We do have some federal response, but as we've seen, that's going to continue to decrease as they're in a hiring freeze and continuing to struggle with recruitment and retention. Those counties' ability to respond to fires in initial attack, keep those fires small, will greatly impact the overall cost of fires within the state. The Fire Chiefs Association and Rural Firemen's Association is monitoring this bill, as I mentioned, but obviously we have concerns about the cumulative impacts. With that, I would stand for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions for the chief? All right. Thank you very much for being here. Do we have anyone else that would like to make? Please, Director.
Mr. Chairman, I do apologize. Brenda Henson, Director of the Department of Revenue. There was an administrative question that was asked and I did not answer. It was that regarding Representative Sherwood's question on the latter amendment.
Yes, thank you for coming
regarding, it's on page 3. Nothing in this paragraph shall prohibit a taxpayer from paying the amount of property taxes that would be due without the application of the exemption provided in this paragraph. Property taxation is much more detailed than this 3-page bill would lend itself to you to believe. There's an entire budget process. So every taxing authority that is out there must have a budget. They must have public hearings. They must have a vote of the people within the areas that they're levying a property tax. So all of our other statutes require that the tax roll, that document, that information that the county assessor provides to the county treasurer, that tax roll include taxable value that has been certified by the State Board of Equalization. So the comment related to there's going to be an amount with exemptions and amount without exemptions. Now, where that thinking comes into play is your assessment schedule. Your assessment schedule comes out from the county assessor in that 4th Monday in April time period. It's going to have assessed values. It's going to utilize last year's mill levy as an estimate for how much your taxes would be without exemptions, how much your taxes are going to be with exemptions. Now, keep in mind, this bill could be applied uniformly and across the board before assessments go out. But the long-term homeowners, they've still got till the 4th Monday in May. So we know that those won't be on the majority of assessment schedules. But that's where you see this determination of here's what it would be without exemptions and with exemptions. The tax bill itself has to be those certified values that are taxable value. You're not going to see this is what it would be before and this is what it is after, because literally those taxing entities that are the recipients of that tax dollar amount, as was just mentioned, a fire district can only tax 3 mills on taxable value. This amendment makes it look like the county treasurer can take this additional amount that is not taxable value and send it to those taxing entities. Everyone's audited. We all have auditors that come in and make sure that the dollars balance. So this particular amendment that came across is going to be difficult, and I would encourage county treasurers across the state to chime in on what would they do with that extra money.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Go ahead, Representative Sherwood.
Thank you. And I don't know if this is a question for you or for Jeremiah. I was curious how many counties offered their own individual county level property tax relief last year?
Go ahead, Director.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Sherwood, there were 5 counties that offered their own county option property tax refund program. Albany, Converse, Sublette, Lincoln. I apologize.
That's okay, Director.
But there are 5 counties, and so what happens with those programs is the county commissioners, out of their money, put in the budget a set-aside amount that can be available to refund to taxpayers that apply. And so those are totally administered by the county treasurers in those counties. And again, I do have that information in that presentation from November, and I do apologize that
And I do believe, Director, that 5 counties is up from what it was when I first got started, wasn't it? About 4
Mr.
years ago?
Chairman, great question. The county option program has only been in statute a couple of years, and the 2 years that it's been available, it's been the same 5 counties.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much.
Teton County.
There we go.
Thank you.
Further questions for the Director? All right, seeing none, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there any further public comment on this bill? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure? Moved by Haroldson, seconded by Pendergraph. All right, again on page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Go ahead,
Apologies, Mr.
Representative
Chairman.
Sherwood.
Just really quickly here, I am going to be a no on this bill. And the reason why I don't think this is the best mechanism is I believe that we should let each county craft their own property tax refund programs. That this bill is not a one-size-fits-all solution, as we've heard in testimony. And I do believe the dust has not yet settled on the existing property tax exemptions that we've passed. So we have the 4% cap, we have the long-term homeowners. It's really difficult for us to see the full picture and the full impact of how we're making adjustments to our property tax system. And again, I think this is an affront to local control, that the state is heavy-handed in dictating what relief looks like. And I believe that our counties are the best ones to determine what our refund program should look like, because they know what their reserves are, they know what their budget is, they know what kind of relief that they can provide in a much more targeted way than this bill allows. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that opportunity.
Thank you for your comments. Any further comments on the bill? I will say this, I think that local governments have had time to address this, and some have. We just heard about 5 counties that have a refund program or a relief program. And I do think that there are issues with it being a one-size-fits-all. That's why I am putting some effort into the budget to create some relief. I don't know if relief is the right word, but a backfill for some of these special districts, for these hardship counties. We'll see how the body feels about that. I know that the chamber across the way was fairly well rejecting of those ideas, but we'll see how that goes. I do agree with Representative Sherwood that this is a one-size-fits-all solution, but I think the time has come, and we have delayed on giving some relief to these taxpayers that have been under the pressure of 2 things, both inflation and property tax increases at the same time, whereas our government subdivisions and the state government, for that matter, has received more income based on those property taxes. At the same time, we've had the expense issues of inflation, but we've at least had some mitigating factor in these property taxes. But it's time that the taxpayer themselves see some relief. I don't know if this is going to be the final solution or not, but yesterday, we just passed a bill out of this committee that would begin to try to create a vision for where property taxes should be in the future. And this committee was very much behind that effort. So hopefully, as a state, we can come up with something that the taxpayers can be pleased with, as well as the entities that receive those revenues and provide those services based on those revenues. So with that, if there's no further discussion, Ms. Childers, please take the roll.
Roll call vote, Senate File 69 engrossed, do pass. Representative Allemand? Aye. Representative Angelos? Aye. Representative Haroldson?
Aye.
Representative Pendergraft?
Aye.
Representative Sherwood?
No.
Representative Smith?
Aye.
Chairman Bear?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, 6 aye, 1 no.
Thank you, Ms. Childers. So that is a do pass. this is a committee bill in revenue, so I'll talk to the chairman of revenue. And if Senator McEwen, you could speak with him as well, let's work together and determine who would floor manage this particular bill. Okay? All right, we still have some time to work, committee, so if you don't mind, let's take up the next bill. Thank you all for your input. We appreciate you. So now we're on to House Bill 176, vacancies in public office amends. Welcome, Representative Bratton, to House Appropriations. We're glad to have you here. And you have House Bill 176 before us. If you would please proceed. And I do believe you've shared with us an amendment. Hopefully everyone has this amendment.
Did.
If you could please, as you describe this, also bring the amendment description into the bill as you go through it.
All right, thank you so much for having me today. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Laurie Bratton. I'm representative for House District 51 in Sheridan County, and I'm here to present House Bill 176, clarifying vacancy appointments. This bill amends the process for filling vacancies in elected office. It outlines procedures for temporary appointments when vacancies are not promptly filled and establishes a presumption concerning qualifications to hold office. The bill also makes conforming amendments and repeals conflicting provisions. I'd like to start with just a brief background on the need for this bill. Many of you already are aware that there have been several instances around the state of Wyoming where a vacancy occurred in an elected position, and the statutory process to fill that vacancy became quite controversial due to conflicting provisions in this statute. As you can see from the bill description written by our nonpartisan LSO staff, on page 1, lines 5 and 6, part of this bill repeals those conflicting provisions. The process for filling a vacancy for a political office when the person vacating the office was affiliated with a major party is pretty straightforward. Depending upon the position, either the respective party's county central committee or the state central committee is directed by statute to meet for the purpose of selecting 3 people from their party as potential replacements to be appointed to fill the vacancy. That major party central committee then sends those 3 names to either the county commissioners or to the governor, depending on the particular elected position that was vacated. In recent history, there have been vacancies to be filled by the governor, and our governor has done an exemplary job of dutifully selecting one of the names submitted to him within the time frame as directed by statute. Over the last few years, when that same process was to be completed by a board of county commissioners charged with selecting one of the names provided to them for appointment to fill a vacancy, some of the boards of the county commissioners have elected not to follow the statute, which says they shall appoint a person from the names provided to fill that position. Instead, these boards of county commissioners have pointed to a conflicting provision in the statute which does not say shall, but which does create a provision for a judge to appoint any qualified elector of that major party to fill the vacancy. That provision, as identified by the LSO summary, conflicts with the provision that the board shall select one of the 3 people for appointment. So this bill does a few things. Removes the conflicting provision, which provides an avenue for a judge to make an appointment for a vacancy. It provides for an alternative path if a board of county commissioners or the governor, just to be consistent, does not fulfill their duty to appoint. It creates a non-rebuttable presumption that a person meeting all applicable qualifications under statute to be elected or appointed to that office really does mean qualified. and I'll talk more on that later. And I also have an amendment to the bill, which the Office of the Secretary of State suggested as I sought their input on the bill. And with that, I'd like to take you through the bill. On line 2, or on page 2, line 18, a new paragraph is created, Romanet 7, or BII 7. That paragraph spells out what happens if the vacancy is not filled as required. These changes pertain to partisan elected positions at all levels of state and local governments where there is not already a different specific method in place for filling vacancies. For example, school boards, college boards, and other entities. In subparagraph A, starting on line 2, or on page 2, line 21, you'll see that if a vacancy for a position is not filled within the time specified, then the state central committee of the party that is represented in that position shall fill the vacancy themselves. In subparagraph B, starting on page 3, line 7, you'll see that if a vacancy for a position is not filled within the time specified, then the county central committee of the party that is represented in that position shall fill the vacancy. Again, in subparagraph C, starting on page 3, line 15, you'll see that if a vacancy is for a position that is held by someone who did not represent a political party is not filled within the time specified, then a special election shall be held. For clarity, as we move to page 4, I'm going to skip page 4 for just a second to the attached amendment, which was suggested by the Office of the Secretary of State, and I'll circle back to page 4 in just a minute. The amendment has been drafted because it was pointed out that we missed a portion of statute that has the same line, or has the same language and the same conflicting issues. There's a different statute on the books in Title 18, Counties, Chapter 3, County Officers, Article 5, under County Commissioners, Wyoming Statute 18.3.524, appointment to fill vacancies. This article lays out the same current process for filling vacancies for the specific office of county commissioner. So it's exactly the same thing, but under 18.3.524A, a new paragraph, III 3, is created, which provides if the remaining county commissioners, so this is for a commissioner vacancy, if the remaining county commissioners fail to fill a vacancy within the specified time frame, then the central committee that referred the 3 names will fill the vacancy itself. If the position was vacated by someone who did not represent a political party and the remaining county commissioners failed to fill a vacancy within the specified time frame, then a special election is to be held. This amendment also deletes the conflicting provision 18.3.524B, where a judge may appoint any qualified elector from that party as opposed to choosing one of the 3 people selected by the party. So this amendment does the exact same thing, but in Title 18, which applies specifically to the position of county commissioner, as opposed to Title 22, which is the election code. So same thing, 2 different places. Finally, circling back to page 4 of the bill draft, lines 7 through 10 create a non-rebuttable presumption of qualification. The reason for this is that in one instance, a board of county commissioners told the public that they refused to choose one of the 3 properly selected candidates submitted by the county party because all 3 were unqualified. The reason, because all 3 had run for this county commission at the last election and had missed getting elected at that time by a few hundred votes, finishing 4th, 5th, and 6th in an 8-person race to elect 3. The judge in this case appointed the 4th place finisher to the vacancy. That person went on to win re-election. And in addition, the 5th place finisher from that prior election, who was deemed unqualified, also won the seat on the county board of commissioners in 2024. So that's a little bit of history. It gives you some idea of how this out of hand this situation has gotten. And there are some similar stories from around the state that started. There was one in Goshen County, there was one in Campbell County, there was the one in Sheridan County, and then just recently, a few weeks ago, there was one in Park County. Sorry, I keep forgetting you guys are down there.
Okay. All right.
Almost done.
Okay.
One final point I'd like to make is I've spoken to several district judges, And they have all told me that they do not like this conflicting provision because that puts them in a position to fill these vacancies with respect to their role as judges and the importance of being impartial in their work. Inserting those judges into a partisan fight between county boards and county parties is very unfair to them, and they would rather not be put in this position. So to summarize, this bill removes the conflicting statutes, clarifies what happens if a vacancy is not properly filled, and says that the qualified means per statutory requirements that we all must meet when running for any specific office. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
All right, questions for the bringer? All right, thank you very much, well done. Do we have the agency here? Please come forward from the Secretary of State's office.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Joe Rubino, I'm the Policy Director and Counsel with the Secretary of State's office, joined by Jesse Naiman. He's our Deputy Secretary of State. Secretary is in full support of this bill, as I think Representative Bratton did a great job of doing a walk through the bill, as well as the amendment. The amendment, as we were discussing, really addresses what happened in Sheridan County, and the Secretary had sent a letter in August of 2023 when that happened, or thereabout, following when the County Commission failed to fulfill the vacancy as outlined in the statute. Ultimately, that went to a judge under the current existing statutory requirement, and they just selected from the 3 that the party ultimately, or had originally forwarded to the County Commission. And so I think, the Secretary believes that this provides clarity. It provides a uniform process whereby if a county commission fails to fulfill the statutory duty, it just goes back to the county party instead of the judicial system, and we're in full support of the bill.
Questions for the Secretary of State's office? I have one for you on this non-rebuttable presumption. So do you feel like this solves the problem of someone, basically on their own opinion determining whether someone's qualified or not? And how should the determining body interpret the language that candidate needs to be qualified?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, that was one of the issues that came up when the County Commission in Sheridan County did not fill the vacancy from the 3 that were provided. It was a very interesting conversation around that in the open public comment period about whether or not those 3 candidates were qualified. I think that we had many discussions on these issues when we talked about a qualified elector versus an elector, specifically with respect to Representative Haraldson's bill in 2023, House Bill 103. And I believe that this definitely clears that up and provides for statutory clarity about who exactly is qualified, so that there's not some subjective determination for that. If you're qualified to hold an office under that, then which shall be ascertained readily from voter registration lists, voter rolls, and public information, and that should clear that up. So yes, to directly answer your question, yes, I believe it does.
So in that case in Sheridan, was there ever any follow-up as to the commission's determination as to that lack of qualification? Was there ever any kind of clarity made to that claim?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if this answers your question. I mean, when the county commission in Sheridan County did not pick from one of the 3, it ultimately went to the judge. And when you read the order where the individual was appointed to fill the vacancy for county commission, they did choose from the 3. So if that lends any weight to that, I mean.
So clearly the judge determined that at least one of those candidates was qualified, but no answer as to what the county commissioners were claiming then.
Mr. Chairman, no, not that I recall, and I think that's one of the reasons that putting it in the statute would clear that up.
Very good. Further questions? All right, thank you for being here. Appreciate you. Mr. Raymond, would you like to opine on this? Is there anybody else in the room that would like to speak on this? Ms. Simmons, if you can please come on forward. And we do have someone online, so I'll start with Mr. Raymond, then we'll go online, and then we'll come back to Ms. Simmons. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Jeremiah Riemann here on behalf of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. I want to start by saying, and really clearing it up, no county commissioner, no county board of county commissioner has shirked their responsibility under this statute. The particular case that's been cited, yes, it went to a court to make the appointment. That court also indicated that the Board of County Commissioners were within the right that they undertook. Those 4 county commissioners were actually taken to court individually, and the court in that case stated this: competent and persuasive evidence was not presented at trial to establish that any of the 4 defendant commissioners, A, refused or neglected without just cause to perform any duties required of him or her as a member of the Board of County Commissioners, and B, knowingly committed any act which by law is in violation of his or her official oath and bond. So the commissioners were deemed to be well within their right to make the choice that they did. Mr. Chairman, I'll just share a few things in terms of the county commissioners' opposition to this particular legislation. It's not necessarily that there wouldn't be another body involved. I want to make that very clear. Their concern happens to be that there's no uniform process, in particular as those appointments come forward to them from the Central Committee. And there's a building concern that there are a lot of, if you know the secret handshake, then you might get the appointment or at least a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. And that troubles them. I talked to one of our county commissioners this morning, and she indicated one of their biggest issues is that right now, less than half of their Central Committee members, the positions are actually filled. So they're worried about whether there's a proper evaluation of the full Central Committee at play. I've been in my position for 6 years at the association, and during that time, there have been I think there's been an appointment in nearly every county of this state during that time. That same commissioner that I spoke with this morning indicated she's been a commissioner for 12 years, and she has been a part of appointing a county official for each one of the seats, whether that's commissioner, assessor, attorney, et cetera. That's pretty telling. In my 6 years with the association, there have been exactly 3 times that it went to the court. 2 of those times, the individual ultimately was reelected through the process. I think that shows that things are working. The third one just happened this week in Park County, so we won't know whether that individual is ultimately reelected, although it's the deputy county assessor, and I think he'll have a long career there. So my point being, the process is working as it stands right now, and we don't see that there is a serious need for this legislation to move forward. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd stand for any questions.
Questions for Mr. Raymond? Okay. Seeing none, thank you. Ms. Simmons.
Hello again. Good morning, Chairman and Committee. I am Gail Simmons. I am with Civics 307 and Y-Vote. I also happen to be a resident of Sheridan and was a member of the County Central Republican Committee during this last kerfuffle. I am on and against this bill And I'm going to address vacancies in county position, all the same concerns apply for statewide vacancies. Without going back over again the instances in which a judge has made a selection after the Board of County Commissioners did not. Interestingly, the incident in Goshen County, that particular judge subsequently served as a justice on the Wyoming Supreme Court. I just found that an interesting fact. And then the decision made by a judge in Park County after a botched nominating election by the Central Committee. I want to address the fact that the English language is rich in complexity with nuances in the use of a single word. The context and situation in which a word is used is critical. In this case, qualified. There are two separate general meanings of the word qualified or having qualifications. The first one is having the qualities, accomplishments that fit one for some function or office or competent. The second one, which is what we see in statute, is having met the conditions required by law or custom for exercising a right holding an office. The statute use of qualified was not how that word was being addressed in the context of the meeting that I was in when it was used by a county commissioner. This was after some questions were asked and the three nominees were unfamiliar with one of the most important responsibilities of a county commissioner, which is the comprehensive plan. Not one of them indicated they were aware of that. And so that was the context of qualified. This bill proposes a backup process in the event the County Board of Commissioners do not select one of the three individuals nominated. It substitutes a decision by a single political party over that of a nonpartisan judge. As with the legislative offices, the 8 county elected positions are responsible to all county residents, regardless of political affiliation. As a reminder, that is true for about 90%, while it is true that 90% of the county positions elected in November general elections were determined by nomination in the August primary, the November election is the actual official. In a previous committee, an assertion was made that the precinct committee people are duly elected and therefore are equivalent to those offices determined by all of the electorate of a political division, regardless of political affiliation. The political party precinct people are elected in the August primary by only those electors affiliated with that party who participate in that election. Their responsibilities are to the members of the party, not all residents of the county. Again, all elected offices are officially elected in the November election. There was a bill that did not see the light of day that would have provided for a special election where the vacancy occurs more than a year before the end of the term. That would have effectively rendered the application of 22, 28, 111 just a short-term openings with limited impact. In summary, these efforts, and this is not the only bill that has occurred, are problematic for 4 reasons. Democratic principles. Allowing a party to choose a replacement can undermine the democratic principle of letting constituents decide who represents them. The original official was elected by the voters, and any replacement should also reflect electorate's choice. There is a lack of accountability where a party appointed replacement might not be accountable to the voters as they were not elected through the normal electoral process. This could lead to decisions that do not align with the wishes or interests of the constituency. There is a potential for partisanship, more than we currently have. Political parties selecting replacements may prioritize party loyalty
Ms.
over
Simmons,
competence.
I hate to cut you off, but
I'll do
need
one
to
more
wrap it up.
sentence.
Okay.
Over competence or alignment with the community's needs. This can result in partisan decisions that may not serve the broader public interest. This is another bill that stems from a single instance in a single county with a solution that promotes the authority of a political party. I ask you to resist the urge to place party over the will of the people or an apolitical judge. And I stand for questions.
Okay. Any questions for Ms. Simmons? All right, seeing none,
Thank
thank you
you.
for being here. And I got out of order, Ms. Childress, I apologize for that. And I apologize to you, Mr. Venata. If you would like to opine on this, please introduce yourself to the committee. And welcome to House Appropriations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Vincent Venata, and while I am a member of the Wyoming GOP's Executive Committee and the Park County Executive Committee, I'm testifying on my own behalf today. I was a petitioner in the recent selection process for assessor in Park County, which landed up going to the district court to be decided. I've been involved in this process of replacing vacancies in political office 3 times, twice at the state GOP level, where we replaced the Secretary of, where we provided names for the Secretary of State and the Superintendent of Public Instruction, and once locally here in the most recent process involved with the county assessor. In our issue here with the county assessor, looking at the filings from the court, as the one that occurred in Sheridan County, what is highlighted in those cases is that the board, in this case the Board of County Commissioners, failed to fill the vacancy within the time specified. Representative Brayton's bill, House Bill 176, takes that problem out of the equation, because if it is not filled by the county commissioners in the time that is specified, it goes back to the political party which was for which the office was held with that respective person. So if the assessor in our case was a Republican, the Republican Party chose. If there was a Democrat, then the Democratic Party would choose. So I think the process that's outlined in this House Bill 176 offers an efficient and a fair process to rectify the issue of filling a vacancy. It also takes the judiciary out of the equation. It was my observations that the judiciary in our circumstance here was not very content about having to deal with this issue. Judges are supposed to be nonpartisan, and this becomes problematic because they are making decisions on the issue for a political party. And quite frankly, I like in this new bill, there are a lot of shalls. I like it when legislature says that, state statutes come from the legislature and they say, we shall do something or shall not do something. I dislike that word may because it creates too much ambiguity. So in this case, I believe we need to take the non-elected judiciary out of the process and then have legislation which ensures that the particular political party's choice is given consideration. Because like we saw here in Park County, our county commissioners chose not, or in the case, the words of the court, they failed to choose and kick the can down the road to the judiciary, and that judge did something contrary to what the intent was of the party who fulfilled our statutory duties and provided 3 names to the legislature. And I would stand, to the county commission. So I think that's it on my statement. I would be willing to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Mr. Venata. Any questions for Mr. Venata? Seeing none, we appreciate you being here and your input.
Thank you for allowing me to have that time.
Is there any other public comment on this bill? All right, seeing none, we'll close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure? Moved by Representative Smith, seconded by Representative Alaman, and let's go through the bill. Page 1. Go ahead, Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move the amendment that we have before us, 5101, as written.
Seconded by Smith, moved by Pendergraft. Any discussion on the amendment? So we are bringing in another section of statute, 18.3.524. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. All right, that carries. Continuing on to page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, Ms. Childress, will you please take the roll?
Roll call vote, House Bill 176 do pass with amendments. Representative Alaman? Aye. Representative Angelos voted aye via absentee. Representative Harrelson? Aye. Representative Pendergraft?
Aye.
Representative Sherwood?
No.
Representative Smith?
Aye.
Chairman Bear?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, 6 aye, 1 no.
Okay, thank you very much. That do pass. And Ms. Bratton, if you would please plan on managing that on the floor. And if there's anything we can do to help you, let us know. And thank you all. With that, we are adjourned. Ms. Lean, Representative Lean, I